Let's talk about a word that's causing a major stir in financial markets and political circles: tariffs. Yep, they're front and center again, and the debate is getting really intense. So, are they a smart tool for a modern economy, or are we just dusting off a painful piece of history?
And that right there is the huge question hanging over this whole discussion. To really get a handle on what's at stake, we have to go back in time to a moment that still gives economists nightmares.
All right, let's jump in. We're winding the clock all the way back to 1930, to a piece of legislation that cast a long, dark shadow over the global economy, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. Now, on paper, the idea sounded, well, simple enough, even patriotic. The goal was to protect American farms and factories from foreign competition, but instead of a shield, this law turned into a wrecking ball. The global reaction was swift, it was brutal, and frankly, it was devastating.
And the backlash, it was immediate. Countries like Canada, France, and the UK, around 25 nations in total, hit back with their own tariffs. Global trade didn't just slow down, it basically hit a brick wall, collapsing by 2/3.
So what happened to those very jobs the act was supposed to protect? Well, as global markets for U.S. goods dried up, the exact opposite happened. The unemployment rate more than doubled, pulling the country even deeper into the Great Depression.
And the hit to the financial markets was just staggering. The stock market was almost completely wiped out, losing nearly 90% of its value. Think about that. It took an entire generation for it to climb back to where it was before the crash. So the big takeaway here is that this whole experiment in protectionism backfired. And not just a little bit, we're talking spectacularly. Instead of fixing a problem, it became a massive catalyst that helped turn a bad recession into a catastrophic global depression.
Okay, so that's the scary history lesson. But it brings us right back to today, and the big question on everyone's mind. The people who support modern tariffs, well, they argue that things are completely different now, that comparing today to 1930 just doesn't make sense. And to get their point, you have to look at just how much the American economy has fundamentally changed. Back in the 30s, it was all about physical stuff, things from farms and factories. Today, it's all about services, technology, AI, things you can't really hold in your hand. I mean, just look at this breakdown. Today, a whopping 70% of the U.S. economy is based on services. That part of the economy is way less exposed to the kind of old-school trade wars that brought everything to a halt a century ago. So the argument goes something like this. Today's economy is just built differently. It's more flexible, more innovative. Supply chains can pivot faster. A huge chunk of our growth comes from software and digital platforms that a tax at the border just doesn't affect in the same way. The very engine of the economy has changed. Okay, so with all that context in mind, what are we actually talking about right now? What do the current tariff proposals actually look like? Well, they're a lot more complex than that one single law back in 1930. Today's strategy is more like a toolkit than a single hammer. You've got a broad 10% tariff on basically all imports. Then there's a much heavier 60% tariff aimed squarely at China. And on top of that, there's this temporary 15% tariff that falls under a totally different legal authority. And if you think this is some stable, set-in-stone policy, think again. The situation is changing incredibly fast. Just look at this timeline from 1 week. The Supreme Court knocks down one way of imposing tariffs, and just 2 days later, the White House uses a different law to announce new ones. Imagine trying to run a business with that kind of whiplash. It makes planning almost impossible. And this is where things get really fascinating, because it sets up a major clash right at the heart of the economy, a battle between the president's trade policy and the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. Let's just break this down to the basics. A tariff is, at the end of the day, a tax. And when you tax imported goods, the cost gets passed on. Businesses pay more, consumers pay more, and that pushes overall inflation higher. It's pretty direct. So this creates this incredible tug of war. On one side, you have the White House pushing the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates, to get the economy going. But on the other side, you have these tariffs, which are actively pushing inflation up. That makes it really hard for the Fed to justify cutting rates. The two policies are basically fighting each other. So, where does that leave us? Well, we're standing at this incredible crossroads. We've got the ghost of 1930 serving as a very real, very stark warning of how badly things can go wrong. But we also have a modern, tech-driven, resilient economy that looks nothing like the one from the past.
The big question is, which one of these powerful forces is going to win out and shape our future?